We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? And I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has said on at least 71 occasions that it is free to see a GP and all you need is your Medicare card, not your credit card. But the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare has contradicted the Prime Minister with data showing Australians paid more than $166 million in out-of-pocket costs to see a GP in the month of May alone. Why does the Prime Minister say things he knows are untrue?
And I give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for her question. We are strengthening Medicare. We are cementing quality bulk-billed health care at its heart, something we are absolutely committed to and something that I announced in the electorate of Bass with the $8.5 billion commitment that before I'd finished speaking, the coalition then backed in that position. Back in 2023 in the budget, we tripled the bulk billing incentive for pensioners and concession card holders. Now, when those 11 million Australians go to the GP, they're bulk billed 90% of the time. It is our plan for Medicare in action, and it is working. And that is why we took that principle and then made a decision to extend it to all 26 million Australians for the very first time, lifting bulk billing rates for every patient to 90% by 2030. Now, this is an important part of the reform agenda where Labor not only created Medicare, but we will always work to strengthen it. And I know it annoys those opposite, Mr Speaker, to see this little bit of green and gold. Green and gold, the same colour that our athletes proudly wear. And why do they wear the green and gold? Because it's a source of Australian pride. And just as we take pride in Australian athletes, Emma McKeon I see up there, Jess Fox, I see some great athletes of the past and the present and indeed the future.
Members on my left will cease interjecting. Member for Cowper.
We take enormous pride in the fact that, unlike some countries where people can't get health care because they don't have the money to pay for it, here in Australia we have a different system.
Order. The Manager of Opposition Business. I want to hear the Leader of the Opposition on her point of order.
Mr Speaker, with your indulgence, it's clear with the noise in the gallery the Prime Minister actually didn't hear my question. May I repeat it?
No. No. Order. I heard the question, and if I heard the question, the Prime Minister would have heard the question. So it was easy to say resume your seat, and if you wish to take a point of order on relevance, you can do so. The Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. A point of order on relevance. I highlighted the more than $166 million in out-of-pocket costs to see a GP and asked the Prime Minister why it is that he does not tell the truth, and you do need your credit card as well as your Medicare card.
Let's remind the Leader of the Opposition not to add additional remarks during her point. The Prime Minister has the call.
That is exactly why we are doing this, so that we allow more people to see a GP for free. But there's a big distinction. Mr Speaker, between the two sides of the parliament. We on this side think that people value Medicare because what it says about our country, that we look after people. The other side say things like this. The price signal is about somebody paying a bit extra when they go to the doctor and not receiving a bulk bill consultation. That's what we mean by the price signal, and I think that's vital. Who said that? The Health Minister at the time. The Health Minister at the time who followed Peter Dutton, who tried to abolish bulk billing altogether.
Has concluded. Before I call the member for Bonner, there is a visitor I would like to recognise that I wanted to do at the beginning of question time. And I'm pleased to inform the House that today we are joined by Chairman Kim Jin-pyo, the Special Envoy representing the President of the Republic of Korea and the former Speaker of Korea's National Assembly and his distinguished delegation. On behalf of all members, I wish you a very warm welcome to Australia, and particular to the House of Representatives. Give a call to the member for Bonner.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its commitments to the Australian people to build Australia's future?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Bonner for her question. I congratulate her on her first speech and on the fantastic campaign that she ran. I was a regular visitor to the electorate of Bonner, including in medical centres, and announcing an urgent care clinic there so that more people can see the doctor for free. But we went to the election saying that we would build Australia's future. And one of the things that you need to do that, of course, a precondition is building a stronger economy. And today's inflation number is certainly good news for that. Today's inflation number says that annual inflation is down to 2.1%, 12 full months in the RBA band. Now, when we came to office, here's a comparison for you. When we came to office, the quarterly inflation rate for the March 2022 quarter was the same number. Under the former government, 2.1 in a quarter. Under this government, 2.1 in a year. That making an enormous difference. And that is why the combination of lower inflation, higher wages, quarter after quarter after quarter, and lower taxes means that people are earning more and keeping more of what they earn, making an enormous difference. Building Australia's future means also looking after the next generation, supporting parents to combat the harms of social media so every child can have a childhood. And that's a commitment that I made again today, meeting courageous parents who've lost their children, and reiterating that social media has a social responsibility. We want young Australians out onto the netball courts and the tennis courts and the swimming pools and the football ovals. We want them off their devices and engaging with each other and growing as young people. And this change—
Order. The member for Fisher will cease interjecting.
This change, which I thought had bipartisan support, is absolutely critical going forward. Now, building Australia's future also means strengthening Medicare. It means building a better and fairer education system, and the legislation to cut student debt by 20%, make free TAFE permanent nationwide, and fully fund every single school will make a difference there. We delivered on July 1 a range of cost of living measures. We will continue to focus every day on making a positive difference to people's lives, because that is what good government looks like.
Give a call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. This afternoon on Sky News, the out-of-touch Treasurer described today's inflation numbers as, quote, absolutely outstanding. But according to the ABS, under 3 years of Labor, the cost of eggs has increased by 34%, the cost of bread by 18% and the cost of cereal by 17%. Prime Minister, why does the Treasurer say things he knows are untrue?
Before they call the Treasurer, and I've been clear before I call the Treasurer, if you can just take a seat for a moment. I've been very clear about this. There's not going to be descriptors in questions. It's the same as last term, so I'm going to and that's the same for people asking and answering questions as well. So I'm going to ask the Leader of the Opposition to withdraw that part of the question. I don't want you to question, just withdraw the descriptor.
Mr Speaker, I withdraw the descriptor from the question.
Thank you. And I give the call to the Prime Minister, to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Order. Members on my left.
Mr Speaker, let me get this straight. On Monday they asked us about the unemployment rate when this government's presided over the lowest average unemployment in the last 50 years of any government. Then they asked us about Medicare when we've just been re-elected on a platform of strengthening Medicare. And now, on a day when we get absolutely outstanding inflation numbers, they want to ask us about inflation, Mr Speaker. Now, I'm asked in particular about food inflation. Now, I want to make it really clear for the member for Farrer that when we came to office, food inflation was running at 5.9%, and now it's about half that, 3.0%. And so if the member for Farrer is unhappy about food inflation, she must be absolutely livid at the underperformance of her own government, a government that she was a cabinet minister in. Because when we came to office, inflation had a 6 in front of it, and it was absolutely galloping, absolutely galloping. And because of the work that we've done together, because of what Australians have been able to achieve together, we have got these absolutely outstanding inflation numbers today, and they're outstanding because they are a powerful demonstration of the progress that Australians have made together in the fight against inflation, Mr Speaker. Now, I'm asked about particular elements of the new numbers today, Mr Speaker. Rent inflation has gone down. Housing construction cost inflation has gone down. Food and non-alcoholic beverages inflation has gone down. Fruit and vegetables inflation has gone down. Insurance and financial services inflation has gone down, Mr Speaker, and that's why we've seen today. That's why we've seen today both underlying and headline inflation in the Reserve Bank's target band, headline inflation at the very bottom of the band. Monthly inflation is below the Reserve Bank's target band. It actually has a 1 in front of it in these numbers today, Mr Speaker. So I hope they keep asking me about the inflation data today, because the inflation data today was very, very encouraging. And we know from that question, Mr Speaker, that nothing makes them grumpier than when Australians make progress in their economy together, whether it's the fact that inflation is much lower than we inherited, real wages are growing again, unemployment is low, we got their debt down, we delivered 2 surpluses, interest rates have started to come down as well. Now, we know that there's more work to do because people are still under pressure, and that's why we're rolling out more help this month with the cost of living, much of which was opposed by those opposite.
The call to the honourable member for Maribyrnong.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. How is the Albanese Labor government protecting the next generation of Australians from the perversive pull of social media and giving parents across the country peace of mind?
The call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the member for Maribyrnong for her question. As a psychologist and fierce advocate for Australian families, she knows the importance of the protection of the well-being of Australian kids. Mr Speaker, give our kids 36 more months. It was a simple request to a complicated issue that has now created generational change. A request made by an army of 150,000 parents. Parents like Mia, Rob and Emma, who came to this place today to take the next step on our collective mission to reduce online harms experienced by young Australians. Today, the Albanese government again shows its commitment to putting families at the heart of our decision-making, tabling the rules of Australia's world-leading social media minimum age laws. In response to advice from the eSafety Commission, the online safety rules tabled today specify which types of online services will not be captured by the social media law, including health and education, messaging apps and games. These types of online services have been excluded from the minimum age obligations because they pose fewer social media harms to under-16s or are regulated under different laws. We are implementing these rules and this law on behalf of parents who want and deserve better protections for their kids online. Which is why, Mr Speaker, I want to be clear about YouTube. I was required by the law
to seek advice from the eSafety Commission on the draft rules, and the eSafety Commissioner's advice was clear. 4 out of 10 Australian kids have had their most recent or most harmful experience on YouTube. And on top of that, YouTube uses the same persuasive design features as other social media platforms, like infinite scroll, like autoplay and algorithmic feeds. Against this content and these features, ubiquitous across all social media platforms, our kids don't stand a chance. And that is why I accepted eSafety's recommendation that YouTube should not be treated differently from other social media platforms. I will not be intimidated by legal threats when this is a genuine fight for the well-being of Australian kids. A fight to help Mia, Rob and Emma change lives. There is no perfect solution when it comes to keeping younger Australians safe online. We accept that. But the social media minimum age laws will make a meaningful difference. There's a place for social media, but there's not a place for predatory algorithms that cause our children harm.
Before I call the member for Fowler, I'm pleased to advise the House that in the gallery today is Councillor Rick Furman, Councillor Russell Webb and Councillor Russell Fitzpatrick, mayors from Temora, Tamworth and Bigger Valley. And also I've been advised that the Honourable Nick Reiner AC, who served as the 37th Premier of New South Wales from 1988 to 1992, is in the chamber. Welcome to you all. I give the call to the honourable member for Fowler.
Thank you, Speaker. Prime Minister, your government's 20% student debt reduction will be welcomed by some, but many more will miss out. Last term, I introduced my Fair Study and Opportunity Bill to reverse the Morrison government's punitive fee hikes for arts students, which saw costs double from around $20,000 to $50,000, hitting students in Fowler the hardest. Your one-off reduction doesn't fix this. Will you support my bill when I reintroduce it, or allow this 80% increase to unfairly burden many students?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Fowler for her question. And of course, she wasn't here when the Morrison government made those changes to education, which is what she is talking about. She has been here in the chamber and I know supported the reduction in student debt that passed this parliament today, will pass the Senate as well if it hasn't already. That will benefit 23,000 people in the electorate of Fowler. 23,000 people will benefit by an average of $5,500 each. Students who've studied to get a better start in life at university, people either training or retraining through TAFE, making an enormous difference across the board. What's more is that people will benefit from the changes in the thresholds that we have made, the changes to indexation that we have made. The students will benefit as well in her electorate and others from free TAFE that we are making permanent, which has already benefited over 500,000 Australians, many of whom would have been in the member's electorate. So we will continue to support good government legislation. We have come into this place in the first fortnight and have concentrated, with the first introduction being things that make that practical difference to people's lives, that we were elected on or re-elected on. So whether it be the changes to student debt and that reduction, the changes in the threshold, the changes to how much people have to pay back and when, which will put more dollars in people's pockets, or whether it be the support for cheaper medicines that we've also done in this parliament that will benefit so many people in the electorate of Fowler. What we are determined to do each and every day is to focus on the issues that people in her electorate and electorates like hers are most concerned about, and that is how do we make their lives better, how do we increase opportunity, how do we support aspiration, and how do we make sure that no one gets left behind and no one gets held back.
The call from the honourable member for Cornwall.
My question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to build a better and fairer education system and improve students' well-being? What other approaches is the government being asked to consider?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Can I thank my friend the member for Cornwall for his question and congratulate him on his extraordinary first speech. One of the best that I have ever heard, and there's been some brilliant first speeches in the last few weeks in this chamber. Mr Speaker, some encouraging news. NAPLAN results are out today and they show improvements in literacy and in numeracy. In reading, we've seen improvements in years 5, 7 and 9. And in numeracy, we've seen some real improvements right across the board. This is the first time that this has happened in almost 10 years. Well, all of this is encouraging, but the cold, hard truth is there is a lot more work to do. What the NAPLAN data shows us each and every year is that about 1 in 10 students are below the minimum standards that we set for them, but it's 1 in 3 children from poor families and from regional Australia. And these are the same kids who often end up not finishing high school. And that's why the agreements that we've now signed with all states and territories are so important. They're about fixing the funding of our public schools and targeting that funding to where it's needed. That funding is not a blank cheque. It's tied to real and practical reforms. Things like phonics checks and numeracy checks in Year 1 to help to identify children who need additional support. And that's rolling out in states and territories this year and next year. Things like evidence-based teaching, explicit teaching to help children learn, and catch-up tutoring or small group tutoring to help children who fall behind to catch up and to keep up. And from January of next year, the reforms that all states and territories have now agreed to teacher training at universities will also roll out. All of this is critical to help build a better and a fairer education system. Now, Mr Speaker, the Minister for Communications has just given us an update on social media reforms. We've already banned mobile phones in schools, and we're already seeing a real-life example of the sort of difference that it's making. Teachers tell us that children are more focused in the classroom. They also tell us that our playgrounds at lunchtime are noisier. Kids are playing and talking to each other rather than doom-scrolling. But when school finishes, you know what happens. You see it if you drive past a bus stop at 3 o'clock. You can see kids with their heads down looking at their phone back into the cesspit of social media. And we know the impact this is having on our children, on their health, on their mental health, how it's used to bully and belittle other children. And this is doing something about it. This is a really important step to help our parents, but even more importantly, to help our kids.
Call to the member for Wannon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Electricity prices are now 32% up since Labor came to office. Some households are paying more than $1,300 for their electricity. Minister, do you still stand by the Prime Minister's commitment to the Australian people of a $275 cut to power bills by the end of this year? Or is the Prime Minister saying things he knows aren't true?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for the question, and I'm a little surprised he didn't reference today's CPI figures, but perhaps I shouldn't, because it shows energy prices are down 6.2% on the year, Mr Speaker. But perhaps that's an explanation, or perhaps another explanation is that is in no small part due to the government's energy bill relief, which the honourable member opposed. That's another possible explanation why he missed that fact, although he did reference $1,300, which is roughly the amount you can save by installing a cheaper home battery under the Albanese government's policy. So I thank the honourable member for the plug.
Order. Order. And the House comes to order. Order. We shall hear from the honourable member for Brisbane.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing and Homelessness. How is the Albanese government delivering on its commitment to build more homes, and is the Minister aware of any alternative approaches?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Brisbane for her question. She's already a fierce advocate for delivering more homes in her community, and I know she takes great pride in being a part of a government which is tackling the housing crisis from every angle. Now, Speaker, we've got a housing crisis in our country because for 40 years our country hasn't been building enough homes. And that's why most of the $43 billion investment we are making in addressing this problem is going to building, building, building. And we're making really important progress on this. Speaker, in the last term in Parliament, about 500,000 homes were built around the country, and we're on the pathway to 55,000 desperately needed social and affordable homes to come online. Now, as a nation, we've got to do more. No one accepts that more than our government, and that's why in the second term we're going to build on these foundations and go bigger, bolder and faster. Now, Speaker, I'm asked about alternative approaches, and we have seen quite a few. First, we saw the Coalition spend 9 wasteful years in government doing absolutely nothing about this problem. And, Speaker, you will remember me mentioning from last term that the Coalition were so checked out of housing as an issue that for most of the time they were in government, they didn't even have a housing minister, Speaker. Now, in opposition, they spent the last 3 years in this parliament trying to slow us down or block our positive approaches. Speaker, they delayed housing for people experiencing homelessness, they delayed housing for women and children fleeing family violence, and they delayed new housing coming into the mainstream housing market. Speaker, then they brought to the election something I thought I'd never see, which is a housing policy which would have both built fewer homes in the country, Speaker, and made existing housing more expensive through their dud Super 4 housing policy. Now, I didn't think this could get any worse, Speaker, and indeed I approached this parliament with a sense of hope and optimism. We got the first question in the parliament on housing. I felt fantastic about that. We had an opposition saying that they wanted to be constructive, but, Speaker, yesterday my hopes were absolutely dashed, because the first move this opposition have decided to make on housing is to try to bulldoze the construction of 80,000 desperately needed new rental homes. 80,000 new quality rental homes. Trying to block this proposal is crazy, it is bizarre and is exactly the opposite of what our country needs to be doing. Now, Speaker, it makes me really worried that they have learnt nothing and heard nothing from the very clear message that was sent to all of us on housing at the May election. Now, Speaker, our government is back to work. We're focused on the cost of living, on housing, on Medicare. The Coalition are busy fighting culture wars against non-existent enemies and taking the old Coalition brand of destruction and dysfunction into the new term. Now, Speaker, they have a choice this parliament. Are they going to continue to be housing hypocrites, or are they going to come with us and work on this great national challenge that our government is confronting?
Before I call the member for Wannon, I'm also pleased to advise that in the gallery, the Southern Gallery, is former Minister and former Senator, the Honourable Mark Abib, joining us today. Give the call to the Honourable Member for Wannon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Minister, do you still stand by your government's commitment to cut power bills by $275 by the end of the year?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Mr Speaker. The honourable member refers to modelling done in 2021, which we gave to the Australian people in 2022.
Order.
And then the Australian people did have a chance to have their say in 2025 on the matter, on the competing plans with energy prices, Mr Speaker, and we accept that judgment of the Australian people. We accept it modestly, Mr Speaker, the Australian people's judgment on May the 3rd. And perhaps the Australian people looked at the fact that energy prices have fallen, as I just said, by 6.2% in the year just gone, and they would know that that wasn't inevitable. They would have been 16.6% higher if the honourable member had had his way and energy bill relief had not applied. That was the key difference. They also know that the opposition went to the election with a very significant plan. We've always recognised there has a very significant plan on energy. The Australian people passed judgment on that. They knew that that plan would lead to higher energy bills.
Order. The Minister will pause so the member for Wannon will take his point of order.
Thanks, Speaker, and it goes to relevance. The question was a very simple, straightforward one. Do you stand by your government's commitment? And that's what the Australian people would like to hear answered.
The minister was not asked about alternative approaches. He wasn't asked about the opposition. I'm going to draw him back to the question that he was asked. He can talk about the question he was asked about government policy, but if he continues on with the opposition, I shall set him down.
Speaker, I was asked if we stand by things, and we do stand by our policy to reduce energy prices by introducing the most cheapest form of energy, which is renewable, and rejecting plans to introduce the most expensive form of energy. We stand by the election commitment we made in the election just gone to deliver cheaper home batteries to people, and that is a policy which is being delivered and taken up by the Australian people with great enthusiasm. The Australian people rejected those alternatives and gave this government a mandate to keep going.
The call to the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. What does the latest economic data tell us, and what progress has been made in the government's fight against inflation?
The call to the Treasurer.
I thank the member for Bendigo for her question and also for her focus on the cost of living, which saw her decisively return to this place at the election, Mr Speaker. Today we did get an outstanding set of inflation numbers for the June quarter and also for the month of June. And those new figures from the ABS showed that headline and underlying inflation have now both fallen to their lowest levels in almost 4 years. Now, this was better than most economists were expecting, and it is better than the forecasts which were in the budget I handed down in March. Headline inflation 2.1% through the year to June, down from 2.4% to March. Headline inflation has now been in the band for a full year, as the Prime Minister said. Trimmed mean inflation 2.7%, down from 2.9%. Monthly inflation now below the Reserve Bank's target range. So these are really welcome and they are really encouraging numbers. When we came to office, headline inflation was 6.1% and rising. It's now about a third of that, Mr Speaker. When we came to office, underlying inflation was 4.9% and rising. It's now almost half of that. So these numbers are a very powerful demonstration of the progress that Australians have made together in the fight against inflation. Quarterly and monthly inflation down. Headline and underlying inflation down. Goods and services inflation down. Tradable and non-tradable inflation down. So today, Mr Speaker, inflation has come down on all of the major measures, and that is a very welcome development. And it's especially welcome when you consider that Australians have made this progress at the same time as more Australians are in work, earning more and keeping more of what they earn. No major advanced economy has achieved what Australia has been able to achieve. Inflation in the low 2s, unemployment in the low 4s, 3 years of continuous economic growth, Mr Speaker, at the same time that inflation is going up in the US, the UK, Canada, New Zealand. It's coming down here in Australia. We've got real wages and living standards growing again. We've delivered 2 surpluses. We've got the debt down, and interest rates have been coming down as well this year, Mr Speaker. But we know that there is more work to do. We know that there are still persistent structural issues in our economy. We know the global environment is uncertain. We know that growth is soft in our economy, and we know that people are under pressure, and that's why we're rolling out more cost of living relief this month, Mr Speaker. It's why we are focused on making sure that we can make our economy more productive, more resilient, our budget more sustainable. It's why responsible economic management is a defining feature of this government, and you saw the fruits of that today in the inflation numbers.
Call to the honourable member for Page.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Minister, is the average household electricity bill in Australia today $275 cheaper than May 2022?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, Mr Speaker, the average energy bill today is 6.2% cheaper than it was last year. That's a fact, Mr Speaker. And as I said before,
Order. The member for Lindsay will cease objecting.
Those opposite asked these questions last term, which was fair game. We answered those questions. And then we took a plan to the Australian people on May the 3rd. Those opposite took a different plan. And the Australian people cast judgment on those plans. This side of the House said we will keep going with a plan to introduce the cheapest form of energy. That's what we said in 2022. That's what the honourable member refers to. Then we repeated that in 2025 and said we will build on that success. And then we said we recognise there's so much more to do. That's why we said we'll also help with cheaper home batteries. And that's why I'm pleased to inform the House and the honourable member that in the last 4 weeks, 17,324 Australian households have installed batteries across Australia, Mr Speaker. 17,324. You know where most of those have been? The outer suburbs and the regions. The regions of Australia, like those represented by the honourable member, a policy he opposed. This was the choice that the Australian people cast judgment on May the 3rd. Finish, Mr Speaker.
The minister's finished his question. Order. When the House comes to order, we'll hear from the honourable member for Robertson.
Mr Speaker, and my question is to the Minister for Health. How are medicines being listed on the PBS helping to improve the lives of Australians? Why is the government so determined to make PBS medicines cheaper for all Australians, and why is this necessary?
The call to the Minister for Health and Ageing and the Minister for Disability and the NDIS.
Thank you, Speaker. It is so terrific to see the member for Robertson back in this chamber. He's a great local member now down that end of the chamber, and he's also a terrific source of advice for those of us in the health portfolio. And he knows, Mr Speaker, that the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme, the PBS, is one of the core pillars of Australia's world-leading healthcare system. Established by yet another Labor government almost 80 years ago, it delivers Australians affordable access to the world's best medicines. And our government has been working hard, Mr Speaker, to make those medicines even more affordable. 4 waves of cheaper medicines policies in the last term of parliament have already delivered Australians a saving of about $1.5 billion, Mr Speaker. But those huge savings don't account for the benefits of the almost 350 new listings on the PBS that our government has made, including, for example, the 8 women's health drugs that I talked about in yesterday's question time. Earlier this month, though, Mr Speaker, we also expanded access to the life-saving wonder drug Trikafta. For the first time, people with cystic fibrosis who have rare and ultra-rare mutations will have access to that drug. And one of those hundreds of patients is Nathan Charles, who joined the member for Robertson and the cystic fibrosis community and me in Sydney to announce this listing. Nathan was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis as a little infant, and his mum was told that she shouldn't expect him to survive childhood. But not only did he survive, he also went on to represent Australia as part of the Wallabies, the only person, Mr Speaker, on the planet who has played contact sport at an elite level with cystic fibrosis. Without PBS listing of Trikafta, Mr Speaker, it costs about $250,000 a year. I've spoken to families, I think the member for Robertson was there, who had to remortgage their house to give access to their sick kids to that drug. For many others, obviously, they didn't have that opportunity and they just had to go without, Mr Speaker. But now Nathan and hundreds of patients like him will get access to this drug, not for $250,000, but for $31 a script, Mr Speaker. And next year, that price will come down even further to just $25 a script if the bill that I introduced to the parliament this morning passes over the course of the coming few weeks. Now, when we first listed Trikafta 3 years ago, Mr Speaker, Australia was a relative latecomer to this wonder drug. But with this, the 4th expansion of the listing we've already made in just 3 years, Australia is now the global leader in equity of access for this drug to the cystic fibrosis community. That is the value of Australia's PBS, and that is why we will never give it up.
Call to the honourable member for Bradfield.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. The Climate Council has advised that Australia's 2035 climate target will not be credible unless it includes a commitment to an orderly phase-out of fossil fuel use, production and exports. As a hopeful host to COP31 next year and to respond to the pleas of our friends in the Pacific, what is the Australian government's plan for that fossil fuel phase-out?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question. And I say to the honourable member, as I say to the Climate Council, the way to reduce fossil fuel use is to build renewable energy. You can't wish away fossil fuels. You can't have a plan to reduce fossil fuel use in Australia or overseas unless you have a plan to build renewable energy. That's what we're doing at home, and that's what we're doing abroad. Just yesterday, I announced the expansion of the capacity investment scheme of 8 gigawatts. This is no small thing, Mr Speaker. Those opposite, they're a trigger warning. I apologise. You should have given a trigger warning when I mentioned renewable energy, Mr Speaker. That's on me. Mr Speaker, that building that renewable energy is the key to a lower emissions energy system, a more reliable energy system and a cheaper energy system. In the last financial year, we saw 4.4 gigawatts of new renewable energy connected. Not investment decisions, not plans, up and running and built and operating and providing energy to Australian houses and industries today. But even more impressive, there were more than 15 gigawatts received connection approvals, which means they're coming. They're in the pipeline. That is a massive pipeline of investment for Australia. Now, when it comes to internationally, I'd make a similar point. You simply can't say that we can abolish fossil fuels or fossil fuel exports and make a difference unless you are working with countries to reduce their use of fossil fuels. Now, when the Prime Minister recently went to China, green iron was a centrepiece of his visit, a visit that was so immaturely criticised by those opposite, Mr Speaker, which showed that they just don't get it when it comes to relationships with major trading partners. That's the sort of work that the Prime Minister has also done in his landmark agreement with the Prime Minister of India. His landmark agreement with the Prime Minister of India, which is working to see them embrace more renewable energy and Australia's renewable energy exports. That's the sort of agreement and working together that is hard work, harder than issuing a press release or calling for something. That is hard work domestically and internationally, which sees real emissions reduction. That's what we see more and more. I'm also been in discussions with the new administration in South Korea on similar plans to work more closely on Australia's renewable energy future and renewable energy exports, which will see emissions come down in Australia and overseas. That's what real reform looks like. It's not issuing a press release. It's not calling for a slogan. It is hard work at home and abroad, and that's what this Prime Minister and this government does.
The call to the member for McNamara.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Home Affairs. What actions have been taken today in respect of the investigation into the Adass Israel Synagogue arson attack?
Give a call to the Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for McNamara for the question and note that no member of Parliament wants to have the situation in their electorate where we see the sort of hate crime that the member for McNamara dealt with the synagogue fire at the Adass Israel Synagogue. Earlier today, Australian Federal Police executed 7 different search warrants at locations across Melbourne as part of Operation Hillfield, the investigation into the arson attack at the Adass Israel Synagogue. Federal Police have today arrested a 21-year-old man who is alleged to be one of 3 people responsible for the attack on the Adass Israel Synagogue in December last year. I want to acknowledge the patience of the Jewish community. People, when there is an attack as reprehensible as this, want to see someone being charged immediately, understandably. But there is always a tension between wanting to see immediate action and making sure that the investigation gets to every person involved. While the attack happened last year, the wounds from that attack are still raw. As Deputy Commissioner Barrett said today, the investigation is not limited to Australia. The Federal Police are investigating criminals offshore who are suspected of working with criminal associates in Victoria to carry out the attack. This follows the arrest 2 weeks ago of another individual who was charged over his alleged role into the theft of a vehicle used by those involved in the attack. I want to thank, on behalf of the government, and I think it's fair to say the Parliament and the nation, the more than 200 members of the Joint Counter-Terrorism Team from across the Australian Federal Police, the Victorian Police and ASIO. Together they have worked more than 50,000 hours on this investigation, and they continue to do so. Following the horrific attack last year, the site was visited by the Prime Minister, obviously the Minister McNamara, other members of the government, myself on 2 occasions. I remember going the second time with the member for McNamara, which would have been more than a week after the attack, and you could still smell the smoke as though it was fresh, and still see at your feet the rubble of the Torah which had been burnt. The government committed to $250,000 almost immediately for the restoration and replacement of those Torah scrolls, and in this year's budget a further $30 million to rebuild the synagogue and the community centre. Not widely known, but in the week following the attack, the Prime Minister had raised with me that the rabbi was on a temporary visa and his family, which was soon to expire. Given that in an act of horrific hate, people had tried to say that the members of the Jewish community and that rabbi in particular were not welcome in Australia, I took, on behalf of the government, the most deliberate action you can take, which was that week to make him and every member of his family permanent residents of Australia, to say they belong, the hatred doesn't. This arrest cannot undo the pain and fear that it caused, but it does send the strongest message that this kind of hate and violence has no place in Australia. This attack was not simply an attack on Jewish Australians. An attack on a synagogue is an attack on Australia and is treated as such. Jewish Australians, like all Australians, have the right to feel safe and to be safe.
And on indulgence to associate with the remarks of the Minister, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. May I associate the remarks of the Minister, associate the Opposition with those remarks, and thank him for updating the House on the investigation, the arrest, the ongoing investigation into the horrific crime at the Adass Israel Synagogue. It's pleasing to know that the rebuilding of the synagogue and the community centre is going ahead, and I want to commend the work of the Joint Counter-Terrorism Unit, the AFP, and to say that we in the Opposition, and I know the government shares these concerns about the rising tide of anti-Semitism in this country, and the expression of that in incidences such as this, and recently, more recently at the East Melbourne Synagogue, are not something we should ever accept in this country, and we should strive continually to educate more, do more and encourage more to dispel that tide.
Give the call to the honourable member for Monash.
My question is to the Prime Minister. On the 22nd of July 2025, the Prime Minister said Australian power bills were being permanently reduced. But Red Energy, Australia's fourth largest energy retailer, has confirmed it will raise energy prices on Victorian families by over 4%, hitting over 230,000 Aussies with another power bill increase of around $50. Why does the Prime Minister say things he knows are untrue?
Give a call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for the question and congratulate her on her first question in this House. The honourable member, it's her first term, so she wouldn't have been here when the member for Hume hid an energy price rise before the last election, Mr Speaker. So perhaps that's why the honourable member got the job, because it's a difficult job. I congratulate the opposition too for their temerity on asking about energy matters this week, Mr Speaker, given the chaos we've seen from honourable members opposite. But the fact of the matter is, on these matters, under this government, we have not only have policy, but we have transparency. Now, when we have difficult figures, we don't change the law to hide them like the member for Hume did just before the 2022 federal election, which should disqualify him for ministerial office forever.
The Minister will pause. Can't hear a word. It's too much noise. But I want to hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Speaker. The point of order, unsurprisingly, is on relevance. I mean, question time is 2 p.m. every day, but the Minister seems unprepared to answer questions today on his own portfolio. The question was about price rises under his government, and he's referring to previous government policy and previous governments over and over.
I'm just going to send another clear signal. I think you know where this is heading. If anyone is taking a point of order, You don't add extra commentary. You just simply state the point of order without giving any other commentary, and that rambling is outside the point of order and the standing orders. So, moving forward, we won't be having that, otherwise points of order won't be taken. So, and the Minister, while he's at it, can return back to the question. He wasn't asked about alternative policies, but I couldn't hear a word he was saying. So it's going to assist everyone if we can listen to what the Minister is saying.
Absolutely, Mr Speaker. And the honourable member asked about the Prime Minister's comments about permanent energy bill reductions. And I'm very glad she did, because what the Prime Minister was referring to was the permanent energy bill reductions you get when you install a cheaper home battery under the Albanese Labor government's policy, Mr Speaker. 17,324 households across the country have done it. And if you already have solar panels, it reduces your bills by $1,100 a year on average. If you don't have solar panels yet, $2,300 on average across the country, which is around 90% of the typical energy bill. So the Prime Minister was well within his rights to point out not only that that was a policy we took to the election, but that is a policy that we have been implementing and delivering successfully since 1 July, just a few weeks after we received that instruction from the Australian people. We've been getting on with the job and delivering it, and the places that have taken up that offer the most have been the people of the outer suburbs and regions of Australia. They know that what's good for their household is good for the country, and that is the cheapest form of energy available for Australia, and that's renewables.
The call to the member for Werriwa.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. What are the key outcomes of AUKMIN and consultations held over the past weekend, and what key achievements were achieved in progressing AUKUS?
Call to the Minister for Defence and the Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the member for her question and congratulate her on her re-election to this place. Last Friday, the annual AUKMIN meetings happened with myself and the Foreign Minister, the annual 2+2 Defence and Foreign Minister meeting with the United Kingdom, and we met with the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy and the UK Defence Secretary John Healey. Our relationship with the United Kingdom is obviously the oldest relationship that we have, and it is characterised by deep people-to-people links, a great history which informs so much of modern Australia today, our system of government, our language, the way in which we organise our security and our defence forces. Our economic relationship is such that for both nations we are our second largest investment partner. But with the advent of AUKUS, it is hard to overstate the significance of the UK decision to build, sustain and operate their future attack-class submarines as being the same class of submarines that will be operated by Australia. This is a huge decision, which is the fundamental bilateral component of the trilateral AUKUS arrangement. Now, on Saturday, we signed the Geelong Treaty between myself and the UK Secretary of Defence, John Healey, and this is the treaty which provides the underpinning of those bilateral arrangements which sit under the architecture of AUKUS, and of course AUKUS itself is embodied in a trilateral treaty which I signed on behalf of Australia in Washington DC in August of last year. What all of this means is that there is today a strategic contemporary dimension to this oldest of our relationships. And it really is elevating our relationship with the United Kingdom to the very highest order. And this is all being built upon the bedrock of trust which has always been there between both countries. And I know that I speak on behalf of the Foreign Minister when I say that we are deeply grateful to both David Lammy and John Healey at a personal level for the personal relationships that we have with them. This is now the second AUKMIN that we have done as a group of four, and I can say to this House that the level of trust that exists between the four of us is so important in terms of being able to accelerate the agenda that we have between our two countries, and an agenda which is pursuing a relationship which is now right there amongst the most important relationships that our nation has.
The call to the member for Curtin.
This is a question for the Minister for Defence Industry, representing the Minister for Industry and Science. In 2023, the government established the National Reconstruction Fund with an announced $15 billion to crowd in investment in emerging industries and technologies. 2 years later, despite the urgent need to unlock private investment in the transition to net zero, it appears that less than 5% of this has actually been invested. Why isn't it moving faster?
Call to the Minister representing the Minister.
Thank you, Speaker. I thank the member for her question and her strong commitment to seizing the opportunities from the transition that are available to us. The National Reconstruction Fund is one part of our plan for a future made in Australia, especially focused on seizing the opportunities from that transition. I'm delighted to inform the House that since it was established less than 2 years ago, it's made 9 investments worth over $430 million. It's investing in innovative technologies and local manufacturing which will help the transition. For example, the NRF has invested $200 million in Arafura Rare Earths Limited. This will deliver the rare earth minerals essential for renewables and the energy grid of the future. Speaker, these investments will ramp up over time, but as I said, the fund was established less than 2 years ago. This is only one part of this government's commitment to seizing the opportunities from the global race to net zero, and I talked about a few of those yesterday. They include production tax credits for critical minerals and renewable hydrogen, $2 billion to transition the Australian aluminium smelters to renewable energy, and $1 billion in the Green Iron Investment Fund. This Green Iron Investment Fund is critical for decarbonising Australia, but also decarbonising the world, and it was also a feature of the Prime Minister's trip to China. This will complement what the National Reconstruction Fund is doing and the investments it is making. Other complements to the National Reconstruction Fund include the Clean Energy Finance Corporation's investments. Last year, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation committed $4.7 billion to that decarbonisation agenda, and the member in her question talked about leveraging private sector investment in this transition, and I'm delighted to inform the member that the CFC has been leveraging $4.14 of private sector capital for every dollar of public sector investment. So that $4 billion unlocked $25.7 billion of total investment and supported over 4,000 jobs. ARENA has also been really successful at leveraging private sector capital.
The Minister will pause, and I'll take a point of order from the member for Curtin.
Just on relevance, the question was about the speed of the rollout of the NRF, not other things that they're doing outside the NRF.
The Minister shall return to the question. I know he is being directly relevant about the project, but he's got another 40 seconds to answer the question, and I'll be listening carefully to make sure he is being directly relevant.
Thank you, Speaker. And as I said in the outset in answering the member's question, in less than 2 years the NRF has made over $400 million worth of investments, including a very significant $200 million investment in Arafura, and we expect it to ramp up over time. The Minister has given directions to the fund's administrators. Importantly, as I said, this is one part of this government's commitment to seizing the opportunities from a transition to net zero, grabbing the job opportunities that are there for governments that take action on climate change and are happy to invest with the private sector. And I thank the member for her question.
The call to the member for Dickson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure. How will the Albanese Labor government's record investments in infrastructure support communities across the country? Why is this investment needed?
The call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thank you very much. And can I thank the member for Dickson very much for that question, and particularly for her support of infrastructure investment and her long-standing advocacy for upgrades to the Dolly's Rocks Road in Queensland, a project that is now underway thanks to this government. This government is making a record investment in infrastructure across our cities and our regions, a pipeline of projects across the next 10 years with a record $125 billion of investment. That record investment stretches right the way across the country, throughout our regions, throughout our cities, our towns and our suburbs. Projects that enhance productivity for our industries, improve safety for our road users, connect us with our loved ones and save us time when we're travelling to and from work. In Queensland, we are, of course, delivering an unprecedented investment into the Bruce Highway, including our historic $7.2 billion safety package, all of which is in regional Queensland. We're delivering the Rockhampton Ring Road that was dramatically underfunded by the former coalition government, and, of course, Stage 1 of Sunshine Coast Rail to get it to Caloundra. Of course, we are also delivering in Queensland the Olympics infrastructure that will leave a lasting legacy for generations to come. In New South Wales, Western Sydney Airport is nearly complete. We're delivering critical road infrastructure in Western Sydney, 15th Avenue, Mamre Road and Elizabeth Drive. These were long neglected from those opposite. We're delivering the new Richmond Bridge, the Muswellbrook Bypass and, of course, Coulsons Creek Road in New England. In Victoria, Sunshine Station, Melbourne Airport Rail Link, North East Link, Western Freeway upgrades and, of course, the Princess Freeway as well continues to receive investment. Down in Tassie, we've delivered and opened the Bridgewater Bridge. We're investing in the Mornington Roundabout and the Lyell Highway. And in South Australia, delivering the Torrens to Darlington project, Whyalla Airport opened just recently, and Mount Barker to Burton interchange upgrades, and as well, and of course, in Western Australia, Metronet, Brooking Channel Bridge, Bunbury Outer Ring Road and more. Northern Territory, we're improving the Tanami Outback Way, investing in Middle Arm and also the Stewart Highway between Katherine and Darwin. And here in the ACT, Light Rail, Molonglo River Bridge and Belconnen. We have also doubled the amount of money that is going to every single council across this country, doubled that money for local roads in our regions as well. Every single council now under a Labor government gets double the amount of money of Roads to Recovery money, something those opposite never even touched. We've had to do that because of the decades of neglect of those opposite who never invested in regional Australia, only pork-barrelled, and that's what they're upset about because those days are over.
Order. There's far too much noise. Order. The Minister for Infrastructure can definitely cease her answer. Order. Give the call to the member for Parkes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The fuel tax credit scheme reduces costs to farmers, businesses and industry, which helps keep food prices lower. Will the Prime Minister rule out any change to the fuel tax credit system?
Call to the Prime Minister.
The only people arguing for higher taxes are those opposite. Are those opposite who, before the member was here, they all voted for higher taxes.
The member for Thadden.
And when it comes to the diesel tax rebate, the fact is that it's been in place for some time. What we did, we haven't changed anything there. And those opposite, they are the only people who have stood for higher taxes. And the question is, will they do what they said they would do before the election, which is they said they would come in here and introduce legislation for higher taxes? We've seen them come in here and they've introduced different private members' bills. I wonder whether the member will move such a private member's bill.
Order. When the House comes to order, we shall hear from the member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Workplace Relations. What action is the Albanese Labor government taking to protect penalty and overtime rates for award-reliant workers? Why is this an urgent priority for the government, and what puts these protections at risk?
Call to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations.
Well, I thank the Speaker for the call and, of course, thank the member for Chisholm, and not only for the question but her advocacy for working people in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. Of course, in our first term, the Albanese government delivered landmark workplace relations reforms. with one goal: to get wages moving. And now we are continuing that work by delivering on our very clear and very simple election commitment to protect penalty and overtime rates in modern awards for 2.6 million low-paid workers. Now, our government believes that workers deserve laws that ensure their pay does not go backwards. And, Speaker, of course, I've been asked why this legislation is urgent. Well, there are cases underway right now to trade away penalty and overtime rates for some of our lowest paid workers, particularly in the retail industry. Now, the Retail Award sets the pay of 350,000 workers directly and indirectly another 690,000 workers. For some of these workers, if this case was to succeed, it is estimated they could stand to lose up to $10,000 through a reduction of their penalty rates and overtime rates. Now, this would be a huge cut to their take-home pay for some of our lowest-paid workers. Now, our government is taking urgent and decisive action to ensure these hard-working Australians' pay is protected. Now, we've been very, very clear about our commitment. We've engaged in genuine consultation right across the board with employers and unions, and for the benefit of the Shadow Minister, small business as well, about our very simple proposition to protect penalty rates and overtime rates. Now, Speaker, I'm asked about any potential risk to these protections, and unfortunately the risk is those opposite. The Shadow Minister was so desperate to stand in the way of protecting penalty rates that earlier today he tried to delay our penalty rates bill by referring it to a committee that doesn't even exist. Now, I have seen a lot of creative ways.
The minister's going to hold her horses for a sec, and I'm going to hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
Look, the minister is inaccurate. The committee was renamed, and the clerk's advice.
Resume your seat. No, resume your seat. We're not having that. No. Oh, look, order. No, I'm going to warn the Manager of and put him on a warning, because he knows that's not appropriate to simply jump up and give your opinion on something. And if he wants to accuse the minister of doing something or not doing something, there are other forms of the House to do that. That is not the time to do it during question time. Okay? We're not going to get into this territory of people just standing up, because if they do that, they won't be here for any more of question time. The Minister for 40 seconds in continuation.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I have seen many, many creative ways that those opposite have tried to cut working people's wages and conditions, but this is the first that I've seen to send it to a committee that doesn't exist. Of course, we know the Shadow Minister loves grandstanding, perhaps to distract from the truth, perhaps to distract from his lack of competence. But the truth is the Coalition doesn't support protecting penalty rates.
Order. Order. The Minister is just going to caution you as well. Just you can sit there for a moment while I hear. We haven't had a point of order on relevance yet. So the member for Moncrieff.
It's on reflections on members. Mr Speaker, I ask the Minister to withdraw that comment.
Order. The Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, we would basically be ending debate if we couldn't have discussions about somebody's competence in this place. I think the opposition, it's one where you'd be careful on the implications for language that they're going to want to use in questions. You made a ruling earlier today about descriptors. That's where there is a descriptor being given to someone's name. But to have a situation where you can't even have an allegation about competence would really kill debate in this chamber.
I'm not going to ask the Minister to withdraw that, but I'm just going to ask everyone in the chamber to be respectful of their language, and particularly when you're referring to other members, just refer to the member by their title or name. That's it. The Minister in continuation.
Well, the Australian people voted for protecting penalty rates, and we will get on with the job to do just that.
Call to the honourable member for Warringah. Oh, my apologies. The Prime Minister.
I ask further questions placed in the notice paper. Mr. Speaker.
Order. House will come to order. I just want to hear from the Prime Minister.
I seek leave to give a personal explanation.
Does the Prime Minister claim to be misrepresented?
I do, Mr. Speaker.
You may proceed.
In question time today, in a question from the member for Monash, the member for Monash asserted that I had said on the 22nd of July 2025 that I'd said that Australian power bills were being permanently reduced and that those comments were untrue and that I knew they were untrue. Mr. Speaker, for the benefit of the House, the interview I did on ABC 7:30 said the following. With determination, word for word in the first question I was asked, with determination, making sure we are an ambitious government. On 1st of July, before Parliament even sat, we of course increased the minimum wage and award wages. We increased paid parental leave by 2 weeks. We introduced superannuation for the first time on paid parental leave. We introduced the rebate, the support for energy batteries. 9,200 Australian households have benefited from that already, permanently reducing in their power bills on top of the energy bill relief. Mr. Speaker, the member is new, so I don't blame the member for Monash, but their Tactics Committee really should do better than that low-rent verbally.
The Manager of Official Business on a question to me.
Thank you, Speaker. I've got a question for you. Today, during question time, we had the unfortunate spectacle of several protesters interrupting proceedings in the gallery, and I want to acknowledge the efficiency of security and other officers in removing those individuals, as they seriously did interrupt proceedings in the House and were obviously very difficult to hear members and questions, including the Leader of the Opposition's question and the Prime Minister. I just want you to report, when you are able to, on the strengthening of the security protocols that you undertook on 4 July 2024 and any other measures that might be required on efficacy. And, of course, if anyone did indeed in this House sign in the individuals responsible for the protesters, of whether there will be any penalties or other action taken against people who have disrupted Parliament.
Yeah, I thank the Manager for the question. A number of members have raised similar concerns to me. The normal procedures and processes will be followed, which will be a report given to me by the Sergeant at Arms regarding the incident, and I will report back to the order. I'm responding to the question made by the Manager. I thought you might be interested in that. And I'll report back to the Manager with the relevant information, including all appropriate actions that I can take regarding the matter.